The call came at 10:47 p.m. while I was reviewing blueprints for our Jacksonville high-rise project. The blue glow from my laptop screen was the only light in my home office, and I'd been nursing the same cup of coffee for 3 hours. In the construction business, you learn to work when the world sleeps, especially when you're bidding on a $50 million contract. Mr. Hayes, this is Dr. Griffin from Baptist Health Miami. Your daughter Madison is in critical condition. Those words hit me like a wrecking ball to the chest. I am Preston Hayes, 59 years old, and I've built a construction empire from nothing, starting as a Sparky in South Miami 35 years ago. I faced down union bosses, survived the 2008 crash, and stared down bankruptcy more times than I care to count. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for that phone call. "What happened?" I managed to ask, my voice sounding like someone else was speaking. "She's suffered severe head trauma from a fall downstairs at her residence. Sir, I need to be direct with you. The next few hours are critical. Her husband gave us your information as emergency contact." Hudson. Her husband Hudson Sterling, the investment advisor I'd never quite trusted but tolerated because my daughter loved him. The man who'd charmed his way into our family 3 years ago with his perfect smile and talk about building wealth through smart investments. "I'll be there in 3 hours," I said, already reaching for my truck keys. "Don't you let anything happen to her until I get there." I didn't pack a bag. I didn't call my office to reschedule meetings. I just grabbed my wallet, my phone, and headed for the door. As I backed my F-250 out of the driveway of my Lincoln Park home, one thought kept hammering in my skull. Something wasn't right about this. You see, Madison had called me just 4 days earlier. Not her usual Sunday check-in call, but a late-night conversation that lasted 2 hours. She'd been crying, something that always tore me up inside. My little girl, now 29 years old and still the most important thing in my world, was scared. "Dad, something's wrong with Hudson," she'd said through tears. "Money's been disappearing from our joint account." When I asked him about it, he got angry. Really angry. He's never talked to me like that before. I'd wanted to drive down to Miami that very night, but Madison had begged me not to make a scene. "Give me time to figure this out," she'd said. "I'm documenting everything. If things get worse, I'll call you." Now, racing south on I-65 toward the airport, I wondered if I should have ignored her request. Should have trusted my instincts about Hudson from day one. Let me tell you something about gut instincts in construction. They keep you alive. When you're walking a steel beam 40 stories up and something feels off, you listen to that voice. When a concrete pour doesn't look right, you stop the job. When a contractor gives you a bid that's too good to be true, you walk away. I'd had that same gut feeling about Hudson Sterling the day I met him. Madison had brought him to Christmas dinner 2 years before they married. He was charming, I'll give him that. Good-looking, well-dressed, said all the right things about respecting my daughter and building a future together. But I'd watched him during that dinner, watched how his eyes moved around my house, taking inventory, watched how he asked questions about my business, my properties, my net worth. Most men meeting their girlfriend's father for the first time ask about her childhood, her interests, what makes her happy. Hudson asked about my investment portfolio. "Dad's built quite the empire," Madison had said proudly, squeezing Hudson's hand. "Started with nothing, and now Hayes Construction is worth over $18 million. I'd seen something flicker in Hudson's eyes then, not admiration for hard work or respect for achievement. It was calculation, the look a predator gets when it spots prey. But Madison was happy, radiant even. And after her mother Charlotte died of cancer 8 years earlier, happiness hadn't come easy for my daughter. Charlotte had been the light in both our lives, and losing her had left Madison cautious about love, careful about trust. When Hudson proposed with a 2-carat diamond ring that probably cost more than most people make in a year, Madison called me sobbing with joy. "He loves me, Dad. He really loves me." I'd wanted to believe it. God knows I'd wanted to believe that my daughter had found someone who would cherish her the way Charlotte and I had. So when they set the wedding date, I wrote them a check for $1.2 million as a wedding gift, enough to buy a beautiful home in Coral Gables, start their life together with security. "You don't have to do that much, Dad," Madison had protested. "Your mother would have wanted you to have everything," I'd told her. And it was true. Charlotte had made me promise during those final weeks in the hospital that I'd take care of Madison, make sure she never wanted for anything. The wedding was beautiful. Madison looked just like her mother in that white dress, walking down the aisle of St. Patrick's Cathedral. For a moment, watching Hudson's face as she approached, I almost believed he loved her. Almost. Now, sitting in the departure lounge at O'Hare waiting for the first flight to Miami, I pulled up Madison's number and tried calling. Straight to voicemail. I tried Hudson's number. Same thing. That's when the second wave of wrongness hit me. In a crisis, people answer their phones, especially when it's family calling about the woman they supposedly love fighting for her life. I'd know the truth soon enough. The automatic doors of Baptist Health Miami slid open with a hiss that sounded like a warning. I didn't stop at the information desk. I didn't wait for visitor badges or directions. My security team had already texted Madison's room number during the flight. Pierce, my head of security, doesn't waste time with hospital bureaucracy when family is involved. Room 314. That number had been burned into my mind for the entire flight from Chicago, through the bumpy approach over Biscayne Bay, through the longest taxi ride of my life from Miami International. I walked through those sterile hallways with the heavy, urgent steps of a man who'd spent 35 years walking construction sites, dodging cranes and moving steel. But this was different. This wasn't about deadlines or profit margins. This was about the only thing in the world that mattered to me. I pushed open the door to room 314 and felt my heart. A muscle that had been hardened by decades of tough negotiations and brutal business decisions, shatter into a million pieces. There she was, Madison, 29 years old now, my little girl who used to ride on my shoulders at job sites wearing a tiny hard hat I'd had custom made for her. The daughter who'd helped me mix concrete in our backyard when she was 8, getting more on herself than in the bucket. The woman who'd graduated summa cum laude from University of Miami Business School and came back to work alongside me, learning every aspect of the construction trade from the ground up. She looked so small in that hospital bed, dwarfed by the machines surrounding her. Her skin was pale as drywall primer, and tubes snaked from her arms to bags hanging on metal poles. The rhythmic beep of the cardiac monitor was the only sound breaking the silence. A mechanical countdown that terrified me more than any OSHA inspection ever could. But it wasn't what I saw that made my blood turn to ice water. It was what I didn't see. The chair. That blue vinyl recliner that hospitals put in every room for family members who refuse to leave their loved one's side. It was empty, pushed back against the wall, cold and untouched. There were no flowers on the windowsill, no jacket thrown over the chair's arm, no thermos of coffee on the bedside table, no magazines, no phone charger, no sign that anyone had been camping out here, holding vigil. There was absolutely no evidence that anyone had been there to hold her hand while she fought for her life. I stood there gripping the metal footrail of the bed so hard my knuckles went white. My daughter was dying, and she was doing it alone. A nurse walked in, a young woman with kind eyes and tired shoulders, the look of someone who'd been pulling double shifts. She stopped short when she saw me, probably surprised to find a man in work boots and a flannel shirt standing like a statue of barely controlled rage in her ward. "Are you family?" she asked, her voice gentle but cautious. "I'm her father," I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. "Preston Hayes. Where is her husband? Where is Hudson Sterling?" The nurse hesitated, and that pause told me everything I needed to know. In construction, when a subcontractor hesitates before answering a direct question, it usually means they're about to tell you something you don't want to hear. She glanced at the empty chair, then back at me, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Pity. Not just for Madison, but for me. "Mr. Sterling left approximately 4 hours ago," she said carefully, like she was explaining why a foundation had failed. "He said he was overwhelmed by grief. He told us he couldn't bear to see her in this condition and needed to find somewhere quiet to pray for her recovery." To pray. The word hung in the air like a load of concrete suspended from a crane with frayed cables. I looked back at Madison's unconscious form, her chest rising and falling with mechanical precision, thanks to the ventilator. 3 years ago, I had walked her down the aisle at St. Patrick's Cathedral and placed her hand in Hudson Sterling's. I had trusted him with the most precious thing in my world. I had given them that wedding gift, $1.2 million, because I wanted my daughter to start her marriage with security. I'd bought them the house in Coral Gables because I wanted her to have a safe harbor, a place where she would always be protected. I'd helped Hudson get connected in Miami's investment community because I wanted my daughter married to a man who could provide for her. I thought I was investing in her happiness. Now it looked like I'd just financed a lifestyle for a man who abandoned his wife when she needed him most. He went to pray, I repeated, letting the words settle like dust after a demolition. Yes, sir, the nurse said, though her tone suggested she had doubts about Hudson's spiritual journey. He seemed very distressed, said he was going to find a chapel where he could think clearly. I nodded slowly. I didn't snap at the nurse, none of this was her fault. Instead, I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. The initial shock was giving way to something colder, more focused, the same mental state I entered when a project went sideways and I needed to make decisions that would save jobs and money. I knew Hudson Sterling. I'd watched him for 3 years. The man who took longer to style his hair than some of my crew took to frame a house. The guy who'd never worked a day of physical labor in his life, whose soft hands had never held anything heavier than a golf club. Hudson didn't pray. Hudson didn't seek solace in quiet contemplation. Hudson sought solace in cocktails and social media likes. I dialed his number, watching my daughter's face for any sign of consciousness while the phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Pick up, you son of a bitch, I thought. Pick up and explain to me why your wife is alone. Dad Preston. Hudson's voice came through the speaker, and immediately something was wrong. He was whispering, but it was the kind of theatrical whisper actors use on stage, designed to convey emotion to the cheap seats. Hudson, I said, keeping my voice level and controlled. I'm at the hospital. Madison's chair is empty. Where exactly are you? Oh God, Dad, it's just so terrible, he replied, and I heard what sounded like sobbing. I'm at the cathedral downtown. I couldn't take it anymore. All those machines, all that beeping. I'm on my knees right now, Dad, praying for her soul. It was a decent performance, I'll give him that. Almost convincing. But Hudson made one critical mistake, the same mistake careless contractors make when they think nobody's paying attention to details. He forgot to mute his background. Beneath Hudson's fake sobbing, I heard something that made every instinct I'd developed in 35 years of construction work start screaming danger. It wasn't the solemn quiet of a cathedral. It wasn't the hushed whispers of prayer or the distant echo of organ music. It was a rhythmic thumping, bass music. Thump, thump, thump. And then, clear as the sound of a crane cable snapping, I heard the distinct clink of champagne glasses and a woman's laugh, high-pitched, carefree, and definitely not coming from anyone praying for my daughter's life. "You're at the cathedral?" I asked, my voice dropping to the tone I used when I caught a foreman skimming materials off a job site. "Yes, Dad, it's very peaceful here," Hudson lied, and the bass line got louder for a second, as if someone had opened a door to let the party noise spill out. "I'm lighting a candle for Madison right now. Please, please tell me there's good news from the doctors. Let me tell you something about liars. They always add too many details. An honest man says I'm at church. A liar says I'm at the cathedral lighting a candle while kneeling in the 3rd pew from the altar." Hudson was practically writing a novel about his fake prayer session. "There's news, Hudson," I said, letting my voice drop to the register that used to make union reps sweat during contract negotiations. "Stay exactly where you are. Keep praying. I'll handle everything here." I hung up before he could respond and stood there in the sterile silence of Madison's hospital room. But my head was full of noise, the sound of plans being made, of resources being mobilized, of a man who'd spent decades building things getting ready to tear something down. I looked at Madison one more time, brushed a strand of dark hair from her forehead. Her skin was cold to the touch. "I promise you, sweetheart," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the beeping machines. "He won't get away with this." I walked out into the corridor where Pierce, my head of security, was waiting with the patience of a man who'd spent 8 years watching my back. Pierce had been Miami PD for 15 years before coming to work for Hayes Construction, and he understood that sometimes the most important security work happens when people think nobody's watching. "Track him," I said simply. "Already on it, boss," Pierce replied, handing me a tablet. "GPS from his phone shows he's definitely not at any cathedral. He's at Miami Beach Marina." I looked at the digital map on the screen. The little blue dot was stationary on the water, right where I'd expected it to be. "He's on the boat," Pierce confirmed. "The Charlotte's Legacy, the 60-footer you bought them for their first anniversary. The yacht I'd purchased for $1.2 million, named after my deceased wife because Madison said she wanted to feel like her mother's memory was blessing their marriage. Now Hudson was using that boat, Charlotte's floating memorial, as his personal party venue while his wife fought for her life. The rage that filled me wasn't the hot, explosive anger of a man who just caught someone stealing tools from his truck. This was different. This was absolute zero cold, the kind of cold that can shatter steel if you apply the right pressure in exactly the right place. Just then, Dr. Griffin came around the corner at a near run, his surgical scrubs wrinkled and his face showing the strain of a man carrying bad news. He spotted me and rushed over, sweat beading on his forehead despite the hospital's aggressive air conditioning. "Mr. Hayes, thank God you're here," he said, breathing hard. "We need to operate immediately to relieve pressure on Madison's brain. It's critical. We're talking about a narrow window here, but we need a signature from next of kin or legal guardian before we can proceed." My stomach dropped. Her husband Hudson, didn't he sign the consent forms before he left? Dr. Griffin shook his head, and I saw something in his eyes that scared me more than any crane collapse or building inspection ever had. "That's the problem, sir. We've called Mr. Sterling 4 times in the past hour. He's refusing to give verbal consent over the phone. He says he needs time to think about it, needs to consult with his own attorney about the liability risks before authorizing any surgical procedures." The world stopped spinning on its axis. It wasn't just neglect. It wasn't just abandonment. Hudson was actively stalling. He was using the legal system as a weapon, letting the clock run down while pressure built inside my daughter's skull. He wanted her to die. "How long do we have?" I asked, my voice sounding like it was coming from somewhere else. "Without surgery?" "Until about 1 o'clock a.m., possibly 1:30 a.m. at the latest. Every minute we delay increases the risk of permanent brain damage or—" Dr. Griffin didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "Bring me the papers," I said. "I'll sign everything. Do whatever you need to do to save her. Sir, legally, since she's married, her husband's consent takes precedence unless he's declared incompetent or unreachable. And technically, he's responding to our calls, just refusing to authorize treatment." I stared at Dr. Griffin. "You're telling me that while my daughter dies, we have to wait for permission from a man who's currently partying on a yacht?" The doctor's face told me that yes, that was exactly what the law required. As Dr. Griffin hurried back to consult with the hospital's legal team, I pulled out my phone again, but this time I didn't call Hudson. I called Brooklyn, my attorney, a woman who'd earned her reputation by being more shark than human in Miami's legal waters. She answered on the first ring, despite the late hour. "Preston, what's the situation?" "Hudson's blocking Madison's surgery," I said, my voice steady but deadly quiet. "He's asserting his rights as next of kin to delay the procedure. He's letting her die, Brooklyn." I heard rapid typing on her end. "I'm pulling up the hospital protocols and state law right now. We can file an emergency injunction, petition for temporary guardianship, but how long? Best case scenario, 2 hours to reach a judge, maybe 3 to get an order signed and processed." "Too long," I said, looking back toward Madison's room. "She has less than an hour." "Then we need leverage," Brooklyn said, her voice taking on the edge it got when she was preparing to destroy someone in court. "What do we have on him?" I looked out the hospital window toward the distant lights of Miami Beach, toward the marina where Hudson was celebrating what he thought was his freedom. "We have everything," I said slowly. "Brooklyn, I want you to buy the debt." "Which debt?" "All of it," I said. "Every single penny Hudson Sterling owes to anyone in this city. The house mortgage, the yacht loan, his car payments, credit cards, everything. I want to be the only creditor Hudson Sterling has left in this world. Preston, that's going to take time and serious money." "Then don't waste time talking about it," I snapped. "Call every bank president, every loan officer, every finance company we've ever done business with. Offer them double the face value of Hudson's debt, triple it if necessary. I don't care what it costs." There was a pause, and when Brooklyn spoke again, I could hear the predatory smile in her voice. "Consider it done. Give me 30 minutes. I hung up and turned to Pierce. "Get the boat ready. We're going to pay Hudson a visit." The next 30 minutes moved like a perfectly choreographed construction sequence. Multiple crews working different angles of the same project, each knowing their role, each executing with precision that comes from years of experience. Brooklyn worked her phone like a master electrician working a complex circuit board. I could hear her voice through the hospital corridor as she called in favors accumulated over 20 years of practicing law in Miami, bank presidents who owed her for legal work. loan officers who'd made fortunes following her investment advice, finance company executives who remembered when she'd saved their companies from regulatory disasters. "David, it's Brooklyn. I need you to wake up your loan committee. I have a client who wants to purchase some distressed debt." "No, tonight. Right now." "Yes, I know it's 11 p.m. That's why I'm offering 150% of face value." While Brooklyn dismantled Hudson's financial life one phone call at a time, Pierce coordinated with our boat captain to prepare the Hayes Construction Company yacht, a 45-foot Meridian I used for client entertainment and occasionally for surveillance when waterfront projects needed security oversight. Me? I stood in that hospital corridor making the hardest call of my life. "Madison," I whispered, even though she couldn't hear me through the coma. "I'm going to step away for an hour, but I promise I'm going to fix this. When you wake up, that son of a bitch will never be able to hurt you again." Dr. Griffin approached me with an update that made my blood pressure spike. "Mr. Hayes, we've managed to buy some time with medication to reduce the swelling, but it's temporary. We still need that surgical consent within the next 90 minutes, or—" "You'll have it," I said. "Whatever it takes." My phone buzzed with a text from Pierce. "Surveillance drone deployed over Marina. Visual confirmation. Party in progress on Charlotte's Legacy." I opened the video feed on my tablet and felt my jaw muscles clench so tight I thought my teeth might crack. There it was, the yacht I'd bought to honor my wife's memory, lit up like a floating nightclub. Blue and purple LED lights turned the water around it into some kind of neon circus. The music was loud enough that I could see people on neighboring boats glaring in annoyance. And there, in the center of the upper deck, was Hudson Sterling. He was wearing a white polo shirt and khaki shorts, the uniform of a man who'd never worked a day of physical labor in his life. He had a bottle of champagne in one hand and his phone in the other, probably posting social media updates about his spiritual journey while actually living it up like some trust fund kid. But it wasn't Hudson that made me want to punch through the tablet screen. It was the woman hanging on his arm. She was blonde, maybe 25, wearing a red dress that cost more than most of my crew made in a week. And around her neck, catching the yacht's LED lights like captured stars, was my wife's necklace. The vintage Art Deco piece I'd given Charlotte for our 20th anniversary. The diamonds and platinum that had been her most treasured possession. The necklace I'd passed down to Madison on her 21st birthday, telling her it would connect her to her mother's love forever. Hudson had stolen it. While Madison lay unconscious, he'd gone through her jewelry box like a common thief and given my wife's memory to his girlfriend as party jewelry. That's when I stopped being angry and started being dangerous. My phone rang. "Brooklyn." "It's done, Preston." Faster than I've ever seen debt acquisition happen in my career. "Details," I said, my voice steady as bedrock. "Hayes Asset Management now owns Hudson Sterling's mortgage on the Coral Gables house. Outstanding balance, $380,000. We bought it from Coastal Bank for $570,000. What else? Marine Finance of Florida sold us the yacht loan. Outstanding balance, $240,000. Purchase price, $360,000. They were happy to get rid of a non-performing asset. Credit cards? 6 different cards across 4 banks. Total outstanding, $87,000. We bought the paper for $130,000. Preston, this man was leveraged to the hilt. I did the math quickly. Total debt, $707,000. Total purchase price for that debt, just over $1 million. For a man worth $18 million, it was loose change. For Hudson Sterling, it was a noose. "There's more," Brooklyn continued. His Range Rover lease was already in default, 3 payments behind. The dealer was thrilled to assign the contract to us for $15,000. And Preston, I found something interesting in his credit report. What? He took out a $50,000 personal loan from a private lender 6 weeks ago, high interest, short term. When I called them, they practically begged to sell it to us. Apparently, Hudson's been dodging their calls. So the total was $757,000 in debt, all of it now owned by Hayes Asset Management. All of it callable on demand due to the various breach and acceleration clauses Brooklyn had specifically looked for. "There's one more thing," Brooklyn said, and I could hear the predatory satisfaction in her voice. I pulled his insurance files. He took out a $5 million term life policy on Madison 8 weeks ago. Double indemnity for accidental death. The pieces clicked together like structural steel fitting into place. The missing money from their joint account that Madison had called me about. The mysterious health issues she'd been having, fatigue, dizziness, episodes she'd attributed to stress from their marriage problems. Hudson hadn't just been stealing from her, he'd been poisoning her slowly, methodically, while setting up the insurance payout that would make him rich when she died. $10 million if her death looked accidental. $10 million that he thought he was about to collect. "Brooklyn," I said, my voice taking on the tone I used when giving final instructions before a controlled demolition. "I want you to contact Archer and his team. Have them draw up default notices for every single debt we just purchased. I want Hudson served tonight. Preston, it's almost midnight. We can't serve legal papers at this hour." "We're not serving them at his house," I said, watching the yacht party through my tablet screen. "We're serving them on the boat. And since the boat is now in default, we're also taking possession." I could practically hear Brooklyn's smile through the phone. "Repo action on the water. I like it. Give me 20 minutes to get the paperwork ready." "Make it 15, I said. Every minute we delay is another minute my daughter's brain swells. As I hung up, Pierce appeared at my elbow with our boat captain, a grizzled former Navy man named Rodriguez who'd been running vessels in Miami waters for 30 years. "Boss," Rodriguez said, "we're fueled and ready. Hayes Pride is waiting at the dock. But I gotta ask, what exactly are we planning here?" I looked one more time toward Madison's room, where machines were keeping my daughter alive while her husband partied on a yacht named after her dead grandmother. "We're going to conduct a business meeting, Rodriguez. Hudson Sterling owes Hayes Construction a substantial sum of money, and it's time to collect." I turned to Pierce. "How long to reach the marina?" 20 minutes if we push it." "Then push it," I said. "And Pierce, bring the cameras. I want everything documented. When this is over, I want Hudson Sterling to know exactly how thoroughly he's been destroyed, and I want it all on record." As we headed for the hospital parking garage, my phone buzzed with one final text from Brooklyn. "Legal papers ready. Repo team standing by. Tow trucks positioned at marina exits. Preston, once we start this, there's no going back." I typed my response as we walked. Good. Some bridges are meant to burn. Hudson Sterling thought he was celebrating his freedom. He had no idea he was about to discover what real consequences looked like when you crossed a man who'd spent 35 years building an empire and wasn't afraid to use every tool in his arsenal to protect his family. The hunt was about to begin. The Hayes Pride cut through Biscayne Bay like a blade through water, her twin diesels pushing us toward Miami Beach Marina at 35 knots. Rodriguez kept us in the shipping channel, running dark with navigation lights only, just another late-night vessel in waters that never truly slept. I stood at the bow, tablet in hand, watching the live drone feed of Hudson's party. The distance was closing. 2 miles, then 1.5, then 1 mile. With each passing minute, the reality of what Hudson had done became clearer and more unforgivable. Through the high-definition camera, I could see him clearly now. He wasn't just drinking. He was performing. Hudson Sterling, the grieving husband, had transformed into Hudson Sterling, the liberated bachelor. He was pouring champagne directly from the bottle into people's mouths, laughing like a man who just won the lottery instead of a man whose wife was dying. But it was the details that revealed the depth of his betrayal, the way he kept checking his phone and smiling, the way he whispered in his girlfriend's ear and they both dissolved into laughter, the way he gestured grandly at the yacht around them, as if he owned it all, as if he deserved it all. "Boss," Pierce called from behind me. "Brooklyn's on the line." I took the call on speaker so Pierce and Rodriguez could hear the legal framework for what we were about to do. "Preston, the repo team is in position at the marina. Archer has the default notices ready to serve, but I need to make sure you understand. Once we execute this, Hudson will know exactly what's happening. He'll panic, and panicked men do stupid things." "What kind of stupid things?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "He might try to run. He might try to destroy evidence. Or," Brooklyn paused, "he might try to go back to the hospital and finish what he started." The thought sent ice water through my veins. How long before Dr. Griffin has to operate? Based on his last update, maybe 45 minutes. "Preston, we need to time this perfectly. We take Hudson down, get his consent signature, and get back to the hospital before Madison runs out of time." I looked at my watch, 12:17 a.m. Surgery had to happen by 1:15 a.m. or my daughter would die. "Rodriguez, how long to reach the yacht?" 8 minutes at current speed. How long to secure Hudson and get back to Baptist Health? Rodriguez did the calculation in his head. 20 minutes round trip if everything goes smooth. That left us with exactly zero margin for error. Brooklyn, I said into the phone, have Dr. Griffin prep the operating room. Tell him that in exactly 30 minutes he'll have his consent signature. Preston, what if Hudson refuses to sign? I watched Hudson through the tablet screen as he danced with my wife's stolen necklace glittering around his girlfriend's throat. He'll sign. As we approached the marina, I could hear the party before I could see it. The bass line thumped across the water like a heartbeat, and voices carried on the night air, laughter, shouting, the sound of people who thought they were untouchable. Pierce handed me a Bluetooth earpiece. Boss, you'll be wired the whole time. Brooklyn, myself, and the legal team will hear everything. If Hudson says anything incriminating, we'll have it recorded. The Charlotte's legacy came into view around the harbor breakwater, and seeing it in person made my rage crystallize into something harder and colder than steel. Every LED light, every laughing face, every champagne bottle represented a choice Hudson had made, to party while Madison suffered. There, Rodriguez pointed. Slip 47. Just like Pierce's intel said. I counted roughly 20 people on deck. Young, attractive, the kind of crowd that gravitates toward money and status. None of them had any idea they were about to witness the financial execution of their host. Pierce, signal archer, time to serve papers. From the shadows of the neighboring dock, a rigid, inflatable boat appeared with 4 men in dark suits. They moved with military precision. Archer and his legal enforcement team carrying briefcases and the kind of authority that doesn't ask permission. I watched through binoculars as they tied up to the Charlotte's legacy swim platform. Hudson was too busy performing for his audience to notice the official-looking men climbing aboard his yacht. That's when I saw something that made me want to tear the boat apart with my bare hands. Hudson had his arm around his girlfriend, the blonde wearing Charlotte's necklace, and he was pointing at something on his phone. She laughed and kissed him, and then she held up her own phone to take a selfie. A selfie with my wife's diamonds around her neck while my daughter lay unconscious. But as they posed for their picture, Hudson's phone lit up with a notification. I zoomed in on the screen with the tablet camera and managed to read it. Baptist Health Miami, patient update. Hudson looked at the notification, read it, and then showed it to his girlfriend. She read it too, and instead of looking concerned or suggesting they should leave, she laughed. Actually laughed. Then Hudson did something that burned the last bridge between us forever. He deleted the notification without reading it. He dismissed potentially critical information about his dying wife so it wouldn't interrupt his party. Rodriguez, I said, my voice deadly calm. Take us in. The Hayes Pride slid up to the opposite side of the Charlotte's legacy just as Archer reached the main deck. I could hear Hudson's voice change from party host cheerful to confused and slightly annoyed. Excuse me, gentlemen, this is a private party. I'm going to have to ask you to... Mr. Hudson Sterling? Archer's voice cut through the music like a chainsaw through pine. Yes, I'm Hudson Sterling. Who are you people? I'm authorized representative for Hayes Asset Management. Mr. Sterling, I have legal documents requiring your immediate attention. I climbed aboard the yacht I'd bought for my daughter's happiness, feeling the familiar weight of work boots on a deck I'd once walked proudly. The party guests were starting to notice that something was wrong. The music was still playing, but conversations had stopped. Hudson stood in the center of the deck, still holding his champagne bottle, still wearing his confident smile, but I could see confusion starting to creep into his eyes. Legal documents? Hudson laughed nervously. Gentlemen, I think there's been some mistake. I'm having a private gathering here, and my father-in-law owns this boat. You can't just... Actually, we can, I said, stepping into the circle of LED light. Hudson's face went white. The champagne bottle slipped from his hand and shattered on the teak deck, sending expensive wine and broken glass across the wood where he'd been dancing minutes before. Dad, Preston, he stammered. What are you doing here? Madison, is she... Madison is alive, I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent deck. No thanks to you. Hudson's girlfriend stepped closer to him, her hand instinctively going to the necklace at her throat. She was smart enough to sense that the party was over, but not smart enough to realize she was wearing stolen goods. I don't understand, Hudson said, but his voice was shaking now. Why are you here? I needed some air, needed to think. You needed to think, I repeated, pulling out my tablet and showing him the video feed that had been recording for the past hour. This is you thinking, Hudson. This is you processing your grief. On the screen, he could see himself dancing, drinking, laughing, celebrating. The timestamp showed exactly when he'd received and deleted the hospital notification. Hudson stared at the tablet, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled out of water. Around us, his party guests were starting to back away, phones appearing as they realized they were witnessing something more serious than a noise complaint. That's not... I can explain, Hudson started, but Archer interrupted him. Mr. Sterling, Archer said, unfolding legal documents with the precision of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. You are in default on multiple financial obligations. As of midnight tonight, Hayes Asset Management has acquired all your outstanding debt. Hudson's legs nearly buckled. That's impossible. Nothing's impossible when you have the right connections, I said, watching Hudson's face as the reality of his situation began to sink in. Archer, show him the paperwork. Archer opened his briefcase with the precision of a surgeon and pulled out a stack of documents bound in blue legal folders. Mr. Sterling, as of 11:47 p.m. Tonight, Hayes Asset Management purchased your mortgage from Coastal Bank. Outstanding balance, $380,000. Hudson's hand flew to his chest like he was having a heart attack. You can't. That's my house. Hayes Asset Management also acquired your marine loan from Finance of Florida, Archer continued, his voice steady as a metronome. Outstanding balance, $240,000. This vessel is now our collateral. This is my boat, Hudson screamed, his voice cracking with panic. My name is on the registration. Actually, I said, stepping closer until Hudson had to crane his neck to look up at me, the primary borrower on that loan is Madison Hayes Sterling. You're listed as a guarantor. Since you failed to protect the asset and used it for illegal activities, we're exercising our right to immediate repossession. I gestured to one of Archer's men who shone a flashlight on the glass table next to the hot tub. Lines of white powder glittered in the LED yacht lights like a drug dealer's Christmas display. The party guests around the table scattered like roaches when the kitchen light comes on. Controlled substances on a registered vessel, Archer noted, photographing the evidence with a professional camera. Federal crime, Mr. Sterling. Breach of loan covenants. Immediate acceleration clause triggered. Hudson spun around, looking for support from his party guests, but they were all backing toward the gangway. Nobody wants to be around when the repo men come calling, especially when there's cocaine involved. You can't do this, Hudson yelled, his voice echoing across the marina. I have rights! This is a legal seizure! Actually, it's perfectly legal, Brooklyn's voice came through my Bluetooth earpiece, and I put the call on speaker so everyone could hear. Mr. Sterling, this is Brooklyn Martinez, attorney for Hayes Asset Management. You signed loan documents with standard insecurity clauses. When a lender has reasonable belief that collateral is at risk due to borrower misconduct, they can call the loan immediately. Hudson's girlfriend tugged on his arm. Hudson, baby, what's happening? I thought you said your father-in-law was just a contractor. He is just a contractor, Hudson snapped, but his voice was getting higher and more desperate. This is some kind of mistake, some kind of... Archer, I said calmly. Tell him about the rest. Archer flipped to the next page in his folder. Hayes Asset Management has also acquired your credit card debt across 6 different accounts. Total outstanding, $87,000. Your Range Rover lease, which was already 3 payments in default, $15,000. And a private loan from Miami Hard Money Lending, $50,000. I watched Hudson's face as Archer listed each debt, each number hitting him like a physical blow. His tan was fading to a sickly gray color. Total outstanding debt now owned by Hayes Asset Management, $757,000, Archer concluded. All callable immediately due to breach of contract terms. $757,000, I repeated, letting the number hang in the air like smoke from a controlled demolition. Hudson, do you have $757,000 in your pocket? Hudson patted his pockets frantically, as if he might find $750,000 in his khaki shorts. This is insane. You can't just buy someone's debt. There are laws. There are laws, I agreed. And I followed every single one of them. Brooklyn made sure of that. Hudson's girlfriend was starting to understand that her meal ticket was getting punched. She took a step back from Hudson, her hand moving to the clasp of the necklace around her throat. "Hudson," she said nervously, "maybe we should call someone. Your lawyer or my lawyer?" Hudson laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "With what money? They just took everything." That's when Hudson made his first smart decision of the evening. He looked directly at me and asked the question I'd been waiting for. "What do you want?" "I want a signature," I said simply. "One signature on one piece of paper, and we can discuss your debt situation." "What paper?" Dr. Griffin stepped out from behind Pierce, surgical consent forms in his hand. "Mr. Sterling, I'm Dr. Griffin from Baptist Health. Your wife needs immediate brain surgery to save her life. We need your consent." Hudson stared at the doctor like he was seeing a ghost. What are you doing here?" "Saving time," I said. "Hudson, Madison has about 30 minutes before the pressure in her brain kills her. Sign the paper." Hudson looked at the consent forms, then at the debt documents, then at his party guests, who were streaming off the yacht like it was the Titanic. His girlfriend had already made it to the gangway. "And if I sign it?" "Then we'll discuss payment terms for your debt," I said. "Payment plans, maybe some kind of arrangement. And if I don't sign it?" I smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. "Then at 1 a.m., when my daughter dies, you'll be charged with negligent homicide, and you'll still owe me $757,000. Hudson's hands were shaking as he reached for the pen Dr. Griffin offered, but then he stopped. "Wait," he said, his voice taking on the calculating tone I'd heard when he talked about investment strategies. "If Madison dies, I'm the beneficiary of her life insurance policy. $5 million. I can pay you back and still have plenty left over." The marina went dead silent, except for the sound of water lapping against boat hulls. Dr. Griffin looked shocked. Archer raised his eyebrows. Even Pierce, who'd seen plenty of criminal behavior in his police days, looked disgusted. But I just nodded slowly. "So you'd rather let her die for the insurance money than save her life and owe me money?" "It's not like that," Hudson said, but his voice was weak. "It's just business, a practical decision." "Business," I repeated. "Hudson, let me tell you something about business." I pulled out my tablet and showed him a new video, security footage from Madison's bedroom that I'd been saving for exactly this moment. "This is you, 6 nights ago, injecting insulin into Madison's IV line while she slept." Hudson went white as sailcloth. Where did you—" "Madison installed a hidden camera after money started disappearing from your joint account," I continued. "She was smart enough to document everything, including your girlfriend Scarlett helping you calculate the dosage." On the tablet screen, Hudson could see himself and Scarlett, the private nurse he'd hired, preparing syringes and discussing injection sites. Clear video evidence of attempted murder. "You didn't just plan to collect insurance money, Hudson. You've been slowly poisoning my daughter for weeks, waiting for the right moment to make it look like an accident." Hudson's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the yacht's bench seating, his face buried in his hands. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he whispered. "But it did go this far," I said. "So here's your choice. Sign the surgical consent and spend the rest of your life in prison for attempted murder. Or don't sign it and spend the rest of your life in prison for murder." Hudson looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. "There's no way out, is there?" "No," I said simply. "There isn't." He signed the paper. The surgical consent form trembled in Hudson's hands as he scrawled his signature across the bottom line. His penmanship, usually neat and controlled, looked like a child's scribbles. Dr. Griffin took the paper immediately, photographed it with his phone, and sent the image directly to the surgical team at Baptist Health. "Surgery authorized," Dr. Griffin announced into his phone. "Begin prep immediately. We're en route." Hudson slumped forward on the yacht's bench, his head in his hands. "What happens now?" he whispered. "Now?" I said, looking around at the Charlotte's Legacy one last time. "Now you get off my boat." Archer stepped forward with handcuffs that glinted in the yacht's LED lights. "Hudson Sterling, you're under arrest for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit homicide." Hudson didn't resist as they cuffed him. He was dead weight, a broken man who'd finally run out of lies and schemes. As Archer read him his rights, I noticed Hudson's party guests had completely vanished. The deck that had been crowded with beautiful people and flowing champagne now looked like the aftermath of a hurricane. Empty bottles, scattered food, broken glass from Hudson's dropped champagne. But there was one person still aboard, and she was trying very hard not to be noticed. "Miss," I called to the blonde in the red dress, Hudson's girlfriend who was attempting to slip away in the shadows near the gangway. "We're not quite finished." She froze, her hand instinctively moving to Charlotte's necklace at her throat. In the harsh marina lighting, I could see she was younger than I'd initially thought, maybe 24, 25, young enough to be Madison's younger sister. "The necklace you're wearing," I continued, stepping closer. "It belongs to my family." "Hudson gave it to me," she said quickly, her voice shaking. "It's a gift. I didn't know. It was stolen from my unconscious daughter while she was fighting for her life," I said, my voice dropping to the tone that made construction crews stop what they were doing and pay attention. "Take it off." Her fingers fumbled with the clasp, and for a moment I thought she might run. But Pierce moved to block her path to the dock, and she realized she was surrounded by men who weren't going to negotiate. The vintage Art Deco necklace dropped into my palm with the weight of memory. Charlotte had worn this on our wedding day, had treasured it through 25 years of marriage, had passed it to Madison as her dying wish. Now it was coming home. "What's your name?" I asked the girl. "Scarlett," she whispered. My blood turned to ice. "Scarlett what?" "Scarlett Morrison. I was Madison's nurse." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Scarlett wasn't just Hudson's girlfriend. She was his accomplice, the medical professional who'd helped him calculate insulin dosages and injection techniques. The woman who'd been in my daughter's home, trusted with her care, while slowly poisoning her. "Pierce," I said quietly. "Call Detective Rodriguez at Miami PD. Tell him we have Hudson's accomplice." Scarlett's face crumpled. "I didn't want to hurt her." "Hudson said it would just make her sick, make her need more medical care. He said I'd get more hours, more money. I never thought—" "You never thought injecting insulin into a healthy woman might kill her?" Dr. Griffin interrupted, his voice heavy with disgust. "You're a licensed nurse. You know exactly what massive doses of insulin do to the human body." "I needed the money," Scarlett sobbed. "My student loans, my rent. Hudson promised me $50,000 when Madison's health got worse and needed full-time care. Instead, you're going to get 25 years in state prison," I said. "Conspiracy to commit murder, practicing medicine without proper supervision, elder abuse." "She's not elderly," Scarlett protested. "In Florida, poisoning someone in their home counts as elder abuse regardless of age." Brooklyn's voice came through my earpiece. "Scarlett Morrison, you just confessed to multiple felonies in front of witnesses." As Pierce took Scarlett into custody alongside Hudson, I checked my watch. 12:43 a.m. Madison's surgery had to begin in 17 minutes, and we were still 15 minutes from Baptist Health even if we pushed the engines to their limit. "Rodriguez!" I shouted. "Emergency run to the hospital. Everything you've got." The Hayes Pride's engines roared to life, and we shot away from the marina like a missile. Behind us, I could see tow trucks moving toward the Charlotte's Legacy, repo crews ready to seize Hudson's Range Rover from the marina parking lot. By dawn, Hudson Sterling would own nothing except an orange jumpsuit and a cell in Miami-Dade County Jail. Dr. Griffin was on his phone constantly during the race back to the hospital, coordinating with his surgical team, making sure everything was ready the moment we arrived. The tablet in my hands showed Madison's room where nurses were preparing to move her to the operating theater. "Preston," Brooklyn's voice came through clearly over the engine noise. "I need to tell you something about the insurance policy Hudson mentioned." "What about it?" "I've been digging through the paperwork while you were on the boat. Hudson took out that $5 million policy 8 weeks ago, but there's something he didn't know." "What?" "Madison filed for legal separation 6 weeks ago. She never served him with papers because she was still hoping to work things out, but she filed the initial documents with the court. In Florida, filing for separation can void spousal benefits on insurance policies taken out after the filing date." I felt a grim smile cross my face. So even if she had died, he wouldn't have seen a penny. Madison protected herself legally even when she was trying to save her marriage. The hospital came into view, its emergency department lights cutting through the Miami night like a beacon. We'd made it in 14 minutes. Rodriguez had earned a bonus for that run. As we tied up at the hospital's emergency dock, I could see Madison being wheeled toward the elevator on a gurney, IV bags swinging, medical staff moving with practiced urgency. "Dr. Griffin?" I called as we ran toward the hospital entrance. "How long for the surgery?" 4 to 6 hours if everything goes smoothly." he replied, breathing hard from the sprint. "Preston, I need you to know. Even with the surgery, there could be complications. Brain trauma is unpredictable, but she has a chance. She has a very good chance, better than she had an hour ago." I looked back toward Miami Beach, where Hudson was being processed into the criminal justice system that would own the rest of his life, where Scarlett was learning that being young and pretty doesn't protect you from the consequences of attempted murder, where the Charlotte's legacy was being stripped of everything Hudson had ever touched. "That's all I needed," I said, "just a chance." As the elevator doors closed and carried Madison toward surgery, I realized that, for the first time in hours, I could breathe again. My daughter was going to live. The man who'd tried to kill her was going to prison. And justice, real justice, was finally being served. But the night wasn't over yet. There were still loose ends to tie up, still accounts to settle. Hudson Sterling was finished. But I wanted to make sure he understood exactly how thoroughly he'd been destroyed. And I wanted to make sure that when Madison woke up, she'd know that her father had kept his promise. That the man who'd betrayed her trust would never be able to hurt her or anyone else ever again. The hunt was almost over. Time for the final kill. The surgical waiting room at Baptist Health Miami smelled like bad coffee and anxiety. I'd been pacing the same 20-foot strip of industrial carpet for 3 hours, checking my watch every few minutes, drinking machine coffee that tasted like it had been filtered through construction boots. Pierce sat in one of those uncomfortable vinyl chairs that hospitals seem to buy specifically to make people miserable, his laptop open, coordinating the cleanup operation across Miami. Every few minutes, he'd look up and give me a status update. "Hudson's been processed into Miami-Dade County Jail," he reported around 3:30 a.m. "No bail set yet, but Brooklyn says the prosecutor is pushing for remand given the flight risk and attempted murder charges." "What about Scarlett? Separate facility. They're keeping the accomplices apart until trial. Smart move. Prevents them from coordinating their stories." I nodded, but my mind wasn't really on Hudson and Scarlett anymore. They were finished, neutralized, no longer a threat to Madison or anyone else. My focus was on the red light above the operating room doors that had been glowing for 4 hours now. Dr. Griffin had warned me it would take time. Brain surgery always did. But knowing something intellectually and living through it emotionally are two completely different things. Every minute that light stayed on felt like an hour. My phone buzzed with a call from Brooklyn. Despite the late hour, she sounded wide awake and sharp as a blade. "Preston, we need to talk about what we found in Hudson's apartment." "You searched his place?" "With a warrant, executed 2 hours ago. Miami PD moved fast once they had the video evidence and confessions. What we found, it's worse than we thought." I sat down heavily in one of the waiting room chairs. "How much worse?" "Hudson's been planning this for months. We found detailed research on insulin overdoses, metabolic disorders, how to make poisoning look like natural causes. He'd been studying Madison's medical history, her family genetics, looking for ways to make her death seem plausible." The coffee in my stomach turned to acid. "What else?" "Financial records showing he's been skimming money from their joint accounts for 6 months. Total amount stolen, $340,000. He was gambling it away on cryptocurrency and day trading, losing everything. So he was already broke before the insurance plan. Completely broke. Preston, there's more. We found communication records with 3 other women." "Other women?" "Potential victims. Hudson was cultivating relationships with wealthy women in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Tampa. Same pattern. Charm offensive, quick engagement, moving in with them, gaining access to their finances." I felt sick. How many women has he done this to? "We're still investigating, but there's evidence of at least 2 previous relationships that ended suspiciously. One woman in Fort Lauderdale died in a drowning accident last year. Another in Tampa suffered mysterious health problems until her family intervened and made her break up with him." The realization hit me like a falling beam. Hudson Sterling wasn't just a greedy husband who'd gotten desperate. He was a serial killer who specialized in wealthy women. "Brooklyn, we have to..." "Already on it. I've contacted law enforcement in both cities. They're reopening those cases. Preston, we may have saved more than just Madison's life tonight." I stood up and started pacing again, my work boots squeaking on the polished floor. All those months I'd tolerated Hudson, all those family dinners where I'd bitten my tongue about my instincts, all those times Madison had defended him when I expressed doubts. "There's something else," Brooklyn continued. "We found Hudson's real financial situation. The man is in debt up to his eyeballs. Beyond what we bought tonight. What do you mean? Gambling debts to some very unpleasant people in Miami. Loan sharks, bookies, the kind of guys who don't file lawsuits when you don't pay. They collect with baseball bats. How much does he owe them? At least $200,000. Possibly more. Preston, even if Hudson's insurance plan had worked, even if Madison had died and he'd collected the money, most of it would have gone to paying off criminals who were already threatening him. I sat back down, the full scope of Hudson's desperation becoming clear. He hadn't just been greedy. He'd been terrified. The insurance money wasn't a windfall. It was survival. He'd been planning to kill my daughter to save his own life from the loan sharks he owed. Those debts, I said slowly. What happens to them now that Hudson's in prison? Well, Brooklyn said, and I could hear the predatory smile in her voice. Funny thing about criminal debt. When someone gets arrested for attempted murder, their creditors tend to write off the losses rather than pursue collection. Bad for business to be associated with killers. But technically, the debts still exist. Technically, yes. And technically, a third party could purchase those debts for pennies on the dollar from creditors who just want them off their books. I understood what she was suggesting. Buy Hudson's criminal debts, every single one. Then, when Hudson eventually gets out of prison, if he ever gets out, he'll owe every penny to Hayes Asset Management. We'll own his soul, Preston. Literally and figuratively. Before I could respond, the red light above the operating room doors went dark. A moment later, Dr. Griffin emerged, still in surgical scrubs, looking exhausted but relieved. I was on my feet before he'd taken 3 steps. "Mr. Hayes," Dr. Griffin said, pulling off his surgical cap. "The surgery was successful. We were able to relieve the pressure and repair the damage. Madison is stable. The relief hit me so hard I had to grip the back of a chair to keep from falling down. Is she going to be okay? She's going to be fine. Full recovery expected. There may be some temporary memory issues as she heals, but her cognitive function should return to normal within a few weeks." "When can I see her?" "She's in recovery now. Give us about an hour to get her settled in ICU, then you can visit. She should be conscious by then." I thanked Dr. Griffin and watched him walk away, feeling like a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Madison was going to live. Not just live, she was going to be fine. My phone was still connected to Brooklyn. "Did you hear that?" "I heard. Preston, congratulations, you saved your daughter's life." "We saved her life," I corrected. "And Brooklyn? Buy those criminal debts, all of them. I want Hudson to owe me everything when he gets out of prison in 30 years. Consider it done. Preston, there's one more thing the search turned up that you need to know about." "What?" Hudson kept a journal. Detailed entries about his plan to kill Madison, his research into insulin poisoning, his timeline for execution. But there's something else in there, something personal. "Tell me." "He wrote about you, about how much he resented having to pretend to respect you, how much he hated having to act grateful for your generosity, how much he looked forward to taking everything you'd built and using it for his own purposes." I wasn't surprised. I'd always known Hudson's respect was an act, but hearing it confirmed still stung. What exactly did he write? I'll read you the exact quote. "The old man thinks he's so smart with his construction empire and his blue-collar wisdom. He has no idea that his precious daughter is going to make me rich beyond his wildest dreams. When she's dead, I'll sell everything he ever built and live like a king. He'll die knowing that all his work ended up in my pocket." The rage came back, cold and pure. Hudson hadn't just planned to kill Madison. He'd planned to destroy everything I'd built, everything I'd worked for, everything that represented my life's work. "Brooklyn," I said quietly. "Change of plans. I don't want Hudson to owe me money when he gets out of prison." "What do you want?" "I want to make sure he never gets out." The ICU at Baptist Health Miami was quieter than the main hospital, all soft beeps and hushed voices. Madison lay in bed 7, looking smaller than I remembered, but infinitely better than she had 6 hours ago. The color was returning to her cheeks, and the frightening maze of tubes and wires had been reduced to just an IV and a monitoring line. I sat in the same type of vinyl chair that had been empty when I first arrived, but now it felt like the most important seat in the world. For the first time in hours, I wasn't pacing, wasn't checking my watch, wasn't coordinating a war against the man who'd tried to kill my daughter. Madison's eyes fluttered open at 7:23 a.m., just as the Miami sun was starting to burn off the morning fog over Biscayne Bay. "Dad?" Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper, but it was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in my entire life. "I'm here, sweetheart," I said, taking her hand. Her grip was weak, but real, warm, alive. "How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by one of your bulldozers," she said, attempting a smile. "What happened?" "I remember being at home, feeling dizzy, and then Hudson called 911 and told them you fell down the stairs," I said carefully. Dr. Griffin had warned me that Madison might have memory gaps around the trauma. Madison's eyes sharpened, some of the fog clearing. "Hudson. Where is he? He should be here." I squeezed her hand gently. "Madison, what's the last thing you remember clearly? Before you got dizzy?" She closed her eyes, concentrating. "We had an argument. About money. About the joint account showing transactions I didn't recognize." Her eyes snapped open. "Dad, he was taking money. Large amounts. When I confronted him, he got angry. Really angry. He said I was paranoid, that I was imagining things. What else do you remember? I told him I was going to call you, ask you to look into it. He said if I involved you, he'd make me regret it." Madison's voice was getting stronger, clearer. Then I felt sick, really sick. Like my blood sugar was crashing, but worse. She was remembering. Dr. Griffin had said the memories might return as the swelling in her brain reduced. Madison was smart. She'd figure out what happened even without me telling her. "Dad, where is Hudson? Why isn't he here?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Detective Rodriguez from Miami PD was calling. "Mr. Hayes, we need you to come to the station when you can. Hudson Sterling is asking to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "He wants to plead guilty to attempted murder in exchange for a shorter sentence. Says he has information about other crimes, other victims. The DA wants to hear what he has to say, but she wants you present since you're the one who uncovered all this." I looked at Madison, who was listening to every word despite her weakened condition. "Give me an hour," I told Rodriguez. "I need to make sure my daughter is stable." "Dad," Madison said as I hung up, "Hudson tried to kill me, didn't he?" There was no point in lying to her anymore. Madison was a smart woman, a college graduate who'd been working in the construction business for 3 years. She deserved the truth. "Yes," I said. "He's been slowly poisoning you with insulin for weeks, waiting for the right moment to make it look like an accident. He took out a $5 million life insurance policy on you 2 months ago." Madison closed her eyes, absorbing the betrayal. When she opened them again, they weren't filled with tears. They were filled with something harder. "How did you find out?" I told her everything. The yacht party, the debt acquisition, the confrontation at the marina. I told her about Scarlett's involvement, about Hudson's journal, about the other women he'd targeted. I told her about the criminal debts and the loan sharks. When I finished, Madison was quiet for a long time. "Dad," she finally said, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I never told anyone." "What is it, sweetheart?" 3 weeks ago, I found something in Hudson's home office. A folder hidden in his desk drawer. Madison's voice was steady now, completely clear. "Insurance policies, not just mine. 3 other women, all from different cities in Florida, all for substantial amounts, all purchased within the last 2 years. My blood ran cold. What happened to those women? 2 are dead. 1 moved away suddenly after her family intervened. Dad, I photocopied everything and hid it in Mom's old jewelry box. If those copies are still there." "You documented his other victims?" I was scared to come forward because I thought no one would believe me. Hudson was so charming, so convincing. But I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong. I was already calling Brooklyn as Madison spoke. "Brooklyn, we need to get into Madison's house immediately. She has evidence of Hudson's other victims." "The house in Coral Gables?" "Preston, that's going to be tricky. Technically, Hudson still has residential rights until the foreclosure is finalized." "Then finalize it," I said. "Whatever it takes. We need that evidence." "I'll have papers ready in an hour. Emergency foreclosure based on criminal use of the property." Madison was sitting up now, looking more alert by the minute. "Dad, there's something else. The night I got sick, The night Hudson called 911. I wasn't unconscious when he called. What do you mean? I was barely conscious, but I could hear everything. He waited almost 20 minutes after I collapsed before calling for help. He was timing it, Dad, making sure I'd be in critical condition by the time the paramedics arrived. Did he say anything during those 20 minutes? He was on the phone with someone, a woman. He kept saying, "It's working," and "She's almost gone." Then he said something about a boat party and celebrating. The final pieces were falling into place. Hudson hadn't just planned Madison's murder. He'd orchestrated every detail, including his alibi celebration. My phone rang again. This time it was Pierce. "Boss, you need to see this." We just finished processing Hudson's laptop. He had detailed files on 12 different women across Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. Photos, financial information, relationship timelines. Preston, this guy was operating like a professional serial killer. How many victims? We've confirmed 3 deaths so far, but there could be more. The FBI is getting involved. This is going to be national news. I looked at Madison, who was listening with a mixture of horror and determination. "Dad," she said quietly, "I want to testify. Against Hudson, against all of it. Those other women deserve justice, and their families deserve answers. Madison, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," she interrupted, showing the steel spine that she'd inherited from her mother. "Hudson thought he could destroy me, destroy our family, destroy everything you built. He thought I was just another weak woman he could manipulate and murder." Madison sat up straighter in her hospital bed, her eyes blazing with a fire I hadn't seen since Charlotte was fighting cancer. "He was wrong," she said, "and I'm going to make sure he spends the rest of his life knowing exactly how wrong he was." 6 months later, I sat in the gallery of Miami-Dade Circuit Court watching Hudson Sterling shuffle into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit and shackles. The man who had once strutted around Miami Beach Marina in designer polo shirts now looked like what he truly was: a broken predator facing the consequences of his crimes. The trial had been a media sensation. The insurance killer, as the press dubbed him, had made national headlines when the FBI confirmed that Hudson had murdered or attempted to murder at least 7 women across 3 states over a 5-year period. Each case followed the same pattern: charm, courtship, quick marriage or cohabitation, access to finances, and then systematic poisoning designed to look like natural causes or accidents. Madison had testified brilliantly. 3 months of physical therapy had restored her strength completely, and 3 months of working with prosecutors had turned her into an unshakable witness. When she took the stand and described Hudson's calculated cruelty, his 20-minute delay before calling 911, his theft of her mother's necklace, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. "He told me he loved me," Madison had said, looking directly at Hudson. "But love doesn't involve insulin injections. Love doesn't involve stealing from joint bank accounts. Love doesn't involve timing how long it takes for your wife to die." Hudson's defense attorney, a public defender who'd drawn the short straw in this case, had tried to argue diminished capacity due to gambling addiction and debt pressure. The jury deliberated for exactly 47 minutes before returning guilty verdicts on all counts: 7 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, multiple counts of insurance fraud, and conspiracy charges that would keep him locked up even if he somehow appealed the murder convictions. Judge Martinez had been uncompromising during sentencing. "Mr. Sterling," she said, looking down at him with the kind of disdain usually reserved for child molesters, "you are a predator who specialized in targeting successful independent women. You used their trust, their love, and their generosity as weapons against them. You robbed these women not just of their money, but of their lives, their futures, their family's peace of mind. The sentence was everything Brooklyn had hoped for. Life without parole on each murder count, to be served consecutively, not concurrently. Even if Hudson lived to be 100, he would die in prison. But the legal victory was only part of the justice served. Hayes Asset Management had systematically acquired every debt Hudson had ever incurred, every obligation he'd ever signed. Brooklyn had been ruthless and thorough, purchasing everything from his college student loans to parking tickets to the criminal gambling debts that had initially motivated his killing spree. Total debt owned by Hayes Asset Management, Brooklyn had reported with satisfaction $1.2 million in legitimate debt, plus $340,000 in criminal gambling obligations. All of it legally transferred to our ownership. But the most satisfying part wasn't the money, it was the symbolism. Hudson Sterling, who had planned to inherit Madison's fortune and destroy everything I'd built, now owned nothing. Less than nothing. Every penny he would ever earn in prison commissary work would belong to Hayes Construction until the day he died. The other victims' families had found peace as well. The FBI investigation had provided closure for women who had lost daughters, sisters, mothers to Hudson's schemes. Several families had filed wrongful death lawsuits, and Hayes Asset Management had testified in each case, providing evidence that ensured substantial settlements from Hudson's former insurance companies. Scarlett Morrison had received 25 years for her role as medical accomplice. Unlike Hudson, she had shown genuine remorse, testifying against him in exchange for the possibility of parole after serving 15 years. She would be 48 when she got out, old enough to understand the weight of what she'd done, young enough to potentially rebuild her life. "Dad," Madison said as we walked out of the courthouse on that final day, "I've been thinking about the Charlotte's legacy." The yacht had been sitting in Hayes Asset Management's possession for months while the criminal cases proceeded. I'd been planning to sell it, donate the proceeds to victim advocacy groups. What about it? I want to keep it, restore it, turn it into something positive. I looked at my daughter, who had grown from a trusting young woman into someone harder, wiser, more careful, but not broken. The attempted murder had changed her, but it had also revealed strength she hadn't known she possessed. What did you have in mind? A floating crisis center. Partner with domestic violence organizations. Use it to help women who are in situations like I was. Women who suspect their partners are dangerous but don't know how to prove it or get help. It was a perfect memorial to Charlotte's memory and a perfect use of the vessel Hudson had corrupted with his crimes. "I think your mother would love that idea," I said. 6 months later, the Charlotte's Legacy 2, Madison had insisted on the addition, was anchored in Miami Harbor, serving as headquarters for the Madison Hayes Foundation for Domestic Violence Prevention. Madison ran it herself, using her experience and her mother's inheritance to fund programs across Florida. The foundation's first major success came 8 months after Hudson's sentencing. A woman in Tampa called the foundation's hotline because her new boyfriend was pressuring her to increase her life insurance and had been asking detailed questions about her medical history. Foundation investigators discovered that the boyfriend had a pattern of targeting wealthy women, and police arrested him before he could escalate to violence. "Another Hudson Sterling," Madison told me over dinner that night, "but this time we caught him before he killed anyone." That's when I knew that Hudson's greatest failure wasn't just getting caught, it was creating the very force that would prevent other men like him from succeeding. Hudson Sterling sits in his cell at Union Correctional Institution, 400 miles north of Miami, where the closest he gets to the ocean is the sound of rain on his cell window. He receives regular statements showing his debt balance to Hayes Asset Management, updated monthly to include accrued interest. As of his most recent statement, he owes $1,547,000 and counting. Every month, he's reminded that the family he tried to destroy owns every aspect of his future. Every month, he's reminded that the daughter he tried to kill is thriving, helping other women escape the fate he'd planned for her. And every month, he's reminded that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Madison kept one item from the evidence collection, Hudson's journal, the one where he'd written about his plans to destroy everything I'd built. She framed the final entry, the one where he'd fantasized about living like a king on my family's money. It hangs in her office now, above her desk where she coordinates the foundation's work, a reminder of how wrong one man could be about the strength of the family he'd tried to break. Justice served cold, justice served permanent, justice served complete. This is Preston Hayes, and this is how you protect your family when the system isn't enough. When someone threatens what you've built, you don't just defend it, you make sure they can never threaten anyone else again. Some fathers lecture, some fathers worry, some fathers hope for the best. Smart fathers, we build walls, and when someone tries to tear them down, we bury them so deep they never see sunlight again.